All right, thanks for everybody for coming. My name is Richard Vondro, President of North Iowa Beekeepers Club. Madison Rowe back there, she's our secretary for one more month this week, this month, and then we got to find a new one. So, Vanessa Vondro is our club queen back there. So if you have any questions, just get a hold of one of us here. So, did everybody get a chance to sign up for the raffle drawing and door prizes back there? You still got a chance. You see on our door prizes over there, anybody can bring anything. It does not have to be bee related, as you can see. So you can bring anything you want. We kind of go off by the number of prizes, depends on how many door prizes we give out. The raffle drawing this month we have the food, what is it?
Something sweet.
Pro Sweet from Man Lake, a gallon of sugar feeder for the bees. So got a gallon of that for this month's raffle drawing. If anybody has something they would like to, that would be a good raffle prize, just get a hold of me and we'll see if it'll work out for us. So the raffle drawing money goes to offset that we don't have membership dues for a club, so a lot of that money goes to offsetting that. So kind of help pay for some of the extra expenses. So this last week here, this weekend here, a few of us were down there. Iowa Honey Producers had their annual conference down there in Ames. A lot of good presenters, right, you guys? Mm-hmm. A lot of good information down there. A lot of good presenters down there. It was kind of hard to decide which one you wanted to go to because some of them were kind of going at the same time, so you kind of pick and choose. But it was a very good meeting down there. Within the next month here, we'll know for sure by next month. I think within the next couple of weeks they're going to decide where it's going to be for next year. They had a couple other cities trying to put bids in to get the Iowa Honey Producers to go to their town. So within the next couple of weeks, by next month for sure, I will know when it is next year, and probably the dates too yet will be all set. So they book it about a year ahead of time. And if I remember heard correctly, if those of you were down there at one time, Samuel Ramsey was there about 4 years ago maybe, or 5. I understand that he's going to be one of our main speakers again. For people that don't know who Samuel Ramsey is, he is the one that found that the varroa mites were feeding off the fat bodies of the bees, not the blood of the bees. So he's the one that figured that out. And I know he has been spending the last couple of years overseas, and there's a new varroa, or new mite that there's been coming to head over there. And I know he's been over there working with that one, trying to figure it out and trying to get a head start on it. So, but the way I understood, he's supposed to be one of the presenters for this next year. So, and if those of you had heard him before, he won't lose your attention, I guarantee you. He is funny to listen to, he's comical, he gets his point across, but he makes it fun to listen to. So, if you get a chance to think about it for next year, I would definitely want to go. So, it's going to be a good time. So, this year down there, we had one of our club members down there. Emmett Elling received the Youth Award for 2023 this year. So his grandmother put in an application for him. Some of the stuff, there's different applications, papers back there, but his grandmother sent in an application. He had no idea what was going on. His dad knew, because his grandmother told him he put him in, but he didn't know. So he got the Youth Scholarship Award for 2023, so that was pretty good. Talking to him a little bit, I think they got like 15 hives right now, but he's sophomore, maybe a junior, sophomore I think. His goal is when he gets out of high school, he wants to do bees full time. So he's done a lot of different things. So, but I think there was something on, but I don't know. Nancy, did you see that was on? Yep. Iowa Honey Producers had something. Did you see that? Was it on our group page too? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So if anybody want to check out, it wasn't on our discussion one, wasn't it? It was on the other one. Mm-hmm. So on our main one. So we can maybe pull it over to the discussion one too if we want, and so people can kind of look at it. So, but he got the award for that. So, does anybody have anything they need to bring up or want to talk about for this next month, where we kind of get going here? So, nothing? So, okay, all right. For tonight, we have a speaker, Peggy DeSanto. She's from Hive Hugger up in Minneapolis, and you can see what she's got here for us. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting. I kind of watched her video that she had on it. So we'll turn it over to you, Peggy.
Okay, thank you. Everybody see that okay? Better yet?
Better yet.
A or B?
These lights aren't necessary. People are right
Doesn't
ahead.
matter.
Just the back ones.
Which one?
Yeah, leave the back ones on. There you go.
There you go.
So I am talking tonight about ventilated hives versus condensing hives. And then a little bit about, wow, I was just jiggling the cord. We better not do that again. Sorry about that. What a way to sort of start. Okay, do that a little. And then I'm also going to talk about the Hive Hugger Winterization System. And it did win the American Beekeeping Federation Award for Innovation this year. So a little bit about me. I have been a registered nurse for 35 years, a beekeeper for 6. But it is my years as a nurse that did lay the foundation for why I'm here today talking about beehive insulation. I have worked in the intensive care unit, the emergency room, chemotherapy, the code blue protocols on when to push epinephrine, when to defibrillate. I taught those to doctors and nurses. And as a result, I've been intimately involved with hundreds of people as they fought for their lives. Maybe I was doing chest compressions on them or giving chemotherapy to a 4-year-old. And it's changed me. I know, in the core of my heart, how precious life is. And not just human life, all life. So imagine how I felt that first spring as a new beekeeper in Minnesota when I opened some of my hives and found tens of thousands of dead bees, right? I'm hardwired to save lives. And their deaths were on me. I cried. And year after year, I tried multiple different winterization systems. These are not my hives, but they could have been because I tried many of these techniques. Including straw bales. So what strikes me most as I look at these pictures is we beekeepers will go through great lengths to protect our bees in winter. And we struggle with just how best to do this. So despite trying multiple different systems, I continue to lose about half of my bees every winter. And I learned I was not alone. According to the University of Minnesota Bee Lab, 55 or 50 to 60% colony loss is the average in northern climates. But something inside me said, it's can't we do better by our bees? And as serendipity would have it, around this time, I started dating a man who owns a business in high-tech insulation. So I thought, you know what? This is a chance to prove his undying love for me. I asked him to build me an insulation system for my beehives. Well, he did not, but maybe he did something better. He said, Peg, you do it. I have your back. I believe in you. So that's how this all began. Being I'm from Minnesota, I'm sorry, I'll back up. I wanted to say that besides being the instructor for the code blue protocols, I was also the instructor and the nurse manager for the intensive care unit, where I would teach nurses how to care for these extremely complicated, ill patients. And what I realized, everything we do in medicine to save lives is based in science. And so when I started on this quest to save honeybee lives, it was very important that it was also based in science. And so, yes, being I'm from Minnesota, my first stop was the University of Minnesota Bee Lab. And when I asked them, can you give me any guidance or advice on developing a winterization system? Interestingly, they said, look at the research done by Bill Heschbeck. He's a master beekeeper, engineer, author out east, and he's the pioneer actually of the condensing hive, and I'll go into that in more detail. So I've got to know Bill Heschbeck. He's become a mentor of mine. He's used this product 2 years in a row now. This is going on the 3rd year. Gives it a 2 thumbs up. But I've also gotten to know the research of Etienne Tardif, Derek Mitchell, Tom Seeley, Randy Oliver. And what really struck me the most is there is a lot of data on overwintering. It's current, it's consistent, and frankly, it's gotten pretty high tech. For example, we have infrared thermal imaging now. We can sort of peek inside a beehive and see where there's heat loss. We can see where the cluster is, how big is it. So information that we didn't have many years ago. And besides thermal imaging, we have the whole world of sensors. And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but this particular brand is Broodminder. This little rectangle can give you the temperature and the relative humidity inside your beehive every 10 minutes. And it projects it through like the cloud to your phone or your computer. So you can look at in your living room and see what's going on inside your beehive. And one researcher in particular you might be familiar with as Etienne Tardif. He's in the Yukon. He's a beekeeper, engineer, researcher. He gives many talks like to Hive Alive and such. But what Etienne does, he'll put 20 sensors in a single beehive, and then he'll repeat that for multiple beehives, but he'll just change the insulation system. Tar paper, styrofoam, ventilate, not ventilate. And as a result of all of those sensors and all of that data, he literally, this is his slide, he gets millions of data points. And what they look like, this is a cross-section of a beehive. Every couple inches, he can tell you the temperature and humidity in your beehive. Here's a ventilation channel. Here's the cluster. You know, is the cluster moving? Is it shrinking? And so there's really no longer a mystery what's going on inside your beehive anymore. So the data is there. So as I delved into the research, I want to be the first to say of that 55% winter loss, there are many factors that can contribute to that. Obviously, varroa, a biggie. Diseases. Did you leave enough honey? How is your queen? Maybe it's just a weak hive going into the winter. So our focus was really just on this contributor, cold and moisture. But we thought, you know, if we could develop just an amazing winterization system, maybe we could put a dent in that 55% mortality loss. Not eliminate it, but if we could put a dent in it, it was worth a try. So as I delved into the research, the biggest, and excuse my pun, most heated debate that I came across was this question. Which is the bigger cause of winter mortality? Is it the moisture? Raise the hands. Okay, or is it the cold? It's a mix. And you know what? You're all right. According to the data, it's both. And that's why there's a split, because it is both. And in order to really protect our bees, we need to solve for both. And in order to talk about how to solve for both, I use a relatable life example. So let's all pretend we're going to go on a road trip to the Yukon. So we all pile in this bus, and it's January. It's a really long drive. We have a lot of time to be talking beekeeping. As a result, there's a lot of hot air in the bus. And pretty soon, the windows start to condense down. Moisture collects. Side question, does anybody know the temperature of the windows for condensation to be collected? dew point. So dew point is like a super important term to know for later. So dew point is the temperature of a surface where the water vapor turns into liquid water. As we're all sitting here digesting our supper, a byproduct of our metabolism is actually water vapor. So when that water vapor in the room hits the surface, might be a can of pop, might be a cold window, when it hits a surface in the room cold enough to be at dew point, that water vapor turns into liquid water and condensation occurs. So, what do we do about this on the bus? The bus driver can't see out the windshield, we can't see out the side windows. How do we deal with this condensation? We ventilate, right? He turns on the vent, brings in fresh air, not recycled air. We can crack the windows on the bus. Pretty soon, condensation clears up. We can see again. But now what's happening? It's getting cold, right? Because when the moisture leaves, what leaves with it? Heat. Yeah, precious heat. So let's bring this into a beehive. Like humans, a byproduct of the bee's metabolism is also water vapor. According to Randy Oliver, for every pound of honey the bees eat, they will produce 1¼ cups of water. And a percentage of that water is water vapor. So, like in the bus, the water vapor inside the hive, as it starts to sort of hit surfaces at the dew point, right? Water vapor, dew point, turns into liquid water. And if that's the top of the hive and water condensation collects and drips down on our bees, wet bees are dead bees. So what do many beekeepers do to solve for this problem? They ventilate, right? Like cracking the windows on the bus. They might drill holes in their boxes. They might put a quilt box with holes in it. The wooden inner cover has a hole in it. But this diagram by Derek Mitchell, he's actually a PhD at Leeds University in England in thermal fluids, and he's well publicized in scientific journals. Basically, it's called the chimney or the stacking effect. What happens is when we put holes, whether it's our house or a bee box, is cold air comes in the lower entrance and literally, like a chimney, vents up and out the upper entrance. And so there's just this continual cycle of heat loss when we ventilate our colonies. And interestingly, the more you insulate and the warmer it is in there, the more vicious that ventilation cycle occurs, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And so like on the bus, when we ventilate our hives, the bees get cold. And on the bus, right, no problem, we're on a gas-powered engine, crank the heat to stay warm, but in a beehive, the bees are the engine, right? And how do they generate heat? Well, first, once it gets cold enough, they form a cluster, queen is in the middle, and then these heater bees vibrate their wing muscles like a shivering response to generate heat. And here's a nice thermal image of heater bees. And then if you opened your hives in the spring and found a bunch of dead bees with their bottoms poking out like this, those are heater bees. And so the research says when we require our bees to do this shivering response and generate heat, it's not without a price tag. It's actually quite stressful for them. Bill Heschbeck, the godfather of condensing hives, he says, in a non-insulated, ventilated hive, the bees have to put forth an extraordinary amount of effort to keep the colony alive all winter, and they will pay for it by dying earlier in the spring. This graph, this is a research study done in Australia, and to just give you orientation to it, this is the temperature, and this is metabolic output, like how hard are the bees working on this axis. This point here is the point where the bees start shivering to generate heat. And here's the temperature. It's getting colder, colder, colder. The bees' output, how hard they're working to generate heat, just exponentially climbs the colder it gets. Versus these temperatures are the warmer temperatures where the bees aren't needing to generate heat by shivering. Very little required of them metabolically. So important research on the demand required by the bees when we ask them to generate heat to stay warm in the winter. Etienne Tardif calls it metabolic stress that leads to metabolic death. So these numbers also come from Etienne, and I just want to talk about this in a little bit more detail. He says around, again, 50 to 55 degrees, the bees start to cluster. At 14 degrees, that cluster reaches a point of maximal tightness. I don't know if any of you thought about this before, but that cluster can't just get infinitely tighter. It maxes out at a certain point. And when that happens, if the cold exposure threat continues and they can't do anything more about it to stay warm, the outside layer of bees will go into a chill coma and just start dropping off the cluster until you've just got a pile of dead bees at the bottom of your hive. Or they're so cold and so tightly clustered that they literally can't even move an inch, and you might have opened your hives and found a cluster of dead bees an inch away from honey, and you might be like, oh, they starved to death. Well, they actually froze to death because they were too cold to move around in the colony. What starving to death looks like is that they're still able to move around within the hive, but they're working so hard to generate heat that it's just consuming a ton of energy and a ton of honey for energy that they completely deplete all the honey you left them. And then they starve to death. And a negative effect of having them consume so much honey is the more honey they consume, the more water they need to consume to dilute the honey, and then just the more waste products, right? And with limited opportunities for cleansing flights, that can risk dysentery and spreading nosema. So lots of negative effects of ventilating and cold bees. This is probably the most interesting thing I learned in doing a dive into the research. This is again Derek Mitchell's research. He said the cluster is a survival mechanism we impose on the bees. That in really well-insulated hives and in natural tree cavities where the bees choose to make a home, they don't cluster at all. When they're warm enough, they're just loosey-goosey and they're cruising around living life as a bee. They're not doing this at all. And Etienne Tardif, remember, he's in the Yukon, that's zone 1 and 2. He says in his hives, in well-insulated, non-ventilated hives, the bees' resting metabolism, which just means right now all of you are just your resting metabolism, but you're generating heat just by being alive. So he's saying the bees just being alive, hanging out, is adequate to maintain their internal environment. That means they're not having to shiver. So the research is really clear. If they're warm enough, you don't have to work that hard. In fact, they can just be bees, and that's enough to keep them alive and surviving, in fact, thriving all winter. So really important research. Another detrimental effect of ventilating and cold on the bees that a lot of beekeepers don't know about, I didn't know about this, is actually in the spring. Temperatures start to rise, queen starts laying eggs, but what happens at this time of year, this graph is by Randy Oliver, and it kind of shows you how old the bees are based on the season. The blue portions are the winter bees, and he's basically showing you that come spring, your winter bees are 200 days old. So they're old, and if you didn't insulate, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're stressed. And then come spring, we're like, oh, activate your glands, take care of baby bees. Not only that, now you have to heat the whole brood chamber to 95 degrees, which is never an ask when there's no brood. They don't need to heat anything to 95 degrees. But once brood's in your hive, suddenly huge demand on your bees. And suppose it's a cold snap, or even a couple cold nights, and these workers, these winter bees, if they can't maintain that 95 degrees, they will just stop trying. Brood will die. There's no replacement brood coming down the pipe, right? That's all you got. And so your whole colony will perish. And so I hear again and again beekeepers, oh, they made it through -20 in February, and then in April they up and died on me. A, the winter bees are getting old and tired, and if they were cold, they're dying sooner. But B, it's because it was too cold for them to take care of the brood. And the other thing I learned is if there's huge variations in the temperature in your hive, the queen won't lay either. She knows like that's too unstable, so she's looking for some stability and consistency in the hive. So she will either not lay, or if she lays, then the bees can't keep it warm enough to take care of the baby bees. Last detrimental effect of ventilating and adding a bunch of moisture absorbing materials in our hive is the risk for literally life-threatening dehydration. Because earlier I mentioned, in order for the bees to eat the honey you left them, they need water. They need to dilute that honey in order to process it. And without water in the hive, like, they can starve to death. There's reports of bees desperately flying out of the hive in the winter to try to bring back water because they are desperate at this point. So people don't really think about that when they turn to moisture-absorbing materials and ventilating, is you can dehydrate your colony. So, the last thing that's important to call out about leaving humidity and moisture in the hive, this research showed that relative humidities levels of 59 to 68, 53% of the mites produced offspring. And at these higher humidity levels, it dropped to 2%. And so, by trying to dry out your hive in the winter, you may be helping the mites and then added stress to the bees. So the data is just super clear. Lots of negative implications to cold, dry bees. So yes, ventilating gets rid of moisture, but in doing so, it's hurting our bees. They need the precious water, and it leads to all those life-threatening detrimental effects of cold. So, and it looks like the bees agree, these are upper ventilation. This is an apame hive. If any of you have apames, there's multiple reports of the bees just propolizing up those ventilation, so in the roof. So, yeah, I think the bees are trying to tell us something about ventilating. So ventilating does not solve for both, right? It certainly doesn't solve for cold, and it sort of solves for moisture, but in a bad way, because we actually want the moisture. So it kind of gets negative points on both. So the obvious question that people ask at this point is, well, if we're not ventilating, how do we manage moisture in the hive? And the answer is insulate. But that brings us back to dew point. So you insulate, but in a really specific delve into the research. I came across quite a bit of information on quantifying insulation. This study was actually done in Egypt. It's a little bit older study, but what they did is they took no insulation, and they call it a sackcloth, which I sort of think is probably like tar paper, really maybe a wind block, but not much as far as insulation value. And then they took foam board. And basically the results of this research study showed that the hives with foam board had a significant increase in temperature, honey, and fruit. Significant. And that makes sense, right? Because now we're like, oh yeah, if they're warm, they're eating less honey. If they're warm, the queen will start laying brood earlier. So very compelling data. The only thing, so clearly foam board's a more ideal insulator. This study didn't give us exactly how much foam board. This next research study was done in Illinois just last year. And they basically compared no insulation with foam board, 2 inches on top, 1 inch on the sides. And their data showed that the insulated hives had a 22.5% improvement in overall colony survival. And they had a twofold reduction in bee population decline. Remember, like Bill Heshbeck said, if you don't insulate, your bees are going to die sooner. They do. And there was significantly less honey consumed in the insulated hives. So, right, data's consistent. But their zone 5-7, which is quite a bit warmer than us, but at least we've got some quantification for, foam board amounts and effectiveness. Another study I came across, which is, I think, probably maybe the most important research study. Tom Seeley is a PhD of biology at Cornell, and he's written a lot of books about bees, and he speaks at all the conferences. But back in '76, Seeley and Morris did a research study where they asked the question, when bees naturally choose their own home in nature, what properties are they looking for when picking, a place where they will likely survive? I mean, bees have survived for millions of years. They came from the tropics, and they've learned to adapt in these cold climates, but how? And their study showed, well, they actually like trees that are still alive, thick solid walls, and this concept of sort of infinite amount of insulation above their colony. Remember, super top insulate, keep it above the dew point. Looks like the bees know that. And they liked enclosures with no upper entrances. They chose homes with openings only at the bottom. This is an interesting slide. This is Bill Heshbeck's. This is a Langstroth hive. It's less than an inch of pine. Our value, less than 1, right? And we sort of like, hey, good luck over the winter, you can do it, but that's what we're, setting them up for in winter versus this is what they would choose to live in. I mean, I don't know, is this 4, 5, 6, and then who knows how much on top? And the thing about live trees is I read the water surging through the wood is a thermal, it's thermal mass, like sort of holds on to heat. So there's that too. Besides the thickness of the tree, the fact that it's alive gives a lot of thermal oomph as well. And so last year, Seeley again, and this time Radcliffe, took this study kind of to a whole nother level. And they said, well, we kind of know the general, characteristics of natural hives, but if we beekeepers wanted to insulate our hives to match natural tree hives, what would be the R value? Like, give me quantification of what would it take to mimic a natural tree hive, to make it much closer to a natural home for honeybee. And this research study, again, no ventilating, no upper entrances, R30 on the top of the hive. And they said, R10 on the walls. That's what it would take for you to give the same support as the bees sort of want and choose for their own homes. And interestingly, Etienne, again, he's the beekeeper researcher in the Yukon. This is his slide. And just so you know, Etienne gets 80 to 100% survival in the Yukon. And I've gotten to know him pretty well. And I said, what are your bees dying of? And he says, it's not cold exposure. He says it's nosema, because their winters are so long. So amazing survival rate in a super cold climate, and this is how he overwinters. No top ventilation. Again, R30, and then R10 to 20 on the sidewalls. And he makes a specific point to say he uses a condensing wall on purpose, right? So same principles being shared again and again. So based on the data, in coming up with an insulation system to try to protect bees in zones 1 through 5, Etienne's up here, we're here, the Seeley study was done in zone 5. We came up with a product that we call the Hive Hugger. So I just want to say that, you know, that's a lot of data, that's a lot of science. But the condensing hive is new. Maybe not new to a lot of you, but to a lot of beekeepers, this is a new way of winterizing. And so, you know, for me to come and say, hey, try this Hive Hugger, it's a condensing hive, trust me, that's a big ask. But if people know that it was based on science and that its design was intentional, then I think they feel better about giving it a go. And so that's why I spent a lot of time talking about the science before talking about the specific product. So basically, it's very simple. There's just two components. There's the top panel, and then there's a side wrap. But the top panel is really the key to this product. Has anybody heard of a vacuum insulation panel? Right? So remember my partner business in high-tech insulation? That's the only reason I know these exist. Like, you know, this isn't for sale at Home Depot. They're a very hot, like, specialty insulation product. But what's unique about a vacuum insulation panel, remember thermoses, you know, that keep your drink hot? Those work because they're in a vacuum. There's a vacuum in the thermos. And how vacuums work, in a vacuum, there are no air molecules. And without air molecules, no heat transfer can take place. So they're extremely efficient insulators. So somebody had the idea of, wow, they're great for thermoses. If we could make a panel and make a panel a vacuum, wouldn't that be something? And it is. Vacuum insulation panels are 10 times more efficient than foam board and fiberglass. It's the most efficient material ever created. This graph shows you this is an R value of an inch of a vacuum insulation panel. An inch is an R46. Google it. I mean, it's crazy. Versus foam board or fiberglass, 4.5, 3.3. These bullet points come from the manufacturer. I already mentioned it's 10 times more efficient than traditional insulation, but you probably have vacuum insulation panels in your refrigerator, or you hope you do, because refrigerators with these in them use 50% less energy. My partner, actually one of the businesses, shipping containers that have these panels, they can keep things hot or cold for 5 days at a constant temperature. And if these are not punctured, they will last for 50 years. And you're probably thinking, well, in beekeeping we use sharp hive tools. So they do come with a plastic, it's a thick of plastic sheeting on the sides. And then this is 3M Venture Clad, it's an aluminum cladding, which make it puncture resistant. Like I took a screwdriver and tried stabbing through it and it didn't puncture that. And below the Venture Clad is actually fiberglass tape. So they're puncture resistant, and they're pretty sturdy. I don't know if you all got to see it when we passed it around, but so that's the top panel. I found this on the internet. Does the world need an $800 vacuum insulated cooler? Yeti says yes. So they're being used in Yeti coolers. This isn't $800 in case, just kidding. But basically where you need a lot of insulation and you don't have a lot of room, they're an amazing product. And they're used widely in a lot of other industries. But now, the bee industry. So that's, a little bit more, okay. So I mentioned an inch is R46. We had them made about 3/4 of an inch. So this is an R32, if you're wondering why the difference in the numbers. Clearly, 75% according to Bill Hishbeck of the heat loss is through the ceiling. So that reason alone is a really good reason to super top insulate the top of your hive. A lot of the wraps for sale just do like the walls. But if you're going to insulate one area in your hive, insulate the top. because that, you know, right, like our heat loss through their heads, you know, your house, your roof is way more insulated than the walls. So it just makes sense. Top insulate is more important. And, right, we need to keep it above the dew point. And an R30 will do that. So custom fit, as you can see, on top of the wooden cover, easy to install and remove. So this is 3 vacuum insulation panels to the equivalent of foam boards. But I do want to just say, I have a video out there of this talk. It has like 5,000 views. The Michigan group did a video, it has 5,000 views. So that 10,000 people know about condensing hives now. And we've had some sales, but nothing like you'd think with 10,000. But what's coming in is beekeepers saying, look at my DIY. There's like, and showing me pictures of 6, 8 inches of foam board, and I couldn't be happier, right? Because, you know, it's great if you want to buy that, but there's nothing magical about a condensing hive using this product. You don't need it. Take an empty, so Etienne in the Yukon, he takes an empty hive box, stuffs 6, 8 inches of foam board, you know, 1.5, 2 inches on the side, don't ventilate, you've got your condensing hive. Once you know the principles, it's super easy. So, you know, I was a single woman beekeeper, and so for me to do all that, go to Home Depot, get a pickup truck, cut it out, like not very realistic. So it's convenient, but that's it, okay? So that's all I had to share about the top panel. The second component is the wrap. There's nothing special about this. It is kind of, well, this is high density, so it is a little bit more sturdy than Home Depot's. But what we did is we have Wisconsin Foam cuts these for us, and they're laser cut, water jet laser cut with the corners. So they're like puzzle pieces, kind of fit together nicely like this. So the standard densities in R7, high densities in R8. You add the one R value for the wooden hive box. It's pushing R value 8. And then, like I said, it's super easy to assemble, disassemble, stack, and store, which was important. It takes about 3 minutes to put on your hive. No moisture absorbing materials or cold boxes or any moisture boards, so it's very simple and fast to put on. A couple other specific design features. Foil-faced, and a common question asked is, why not black? And from what I learned in the research, if your hive is dependent on the sun, like the solar gain to heat it, your bees are vulnerable at night and they're vulnerable in cloudy days. And the other negative effect is that when it's sunny and warm, the bees will uncluster and hopefully be warm enough to move around and get their food, but then at night they cluster and then uncluster and cluster. And that's stressful for them. And sometimes they're unclustered and then it drops really quickly and then they recluster and they're all grouped and they didn't get together. So those swings are not helpful for them. And I just want to show you what's possible if you're not relying on black but super insulate instead. So remember those little green rectangles, the sensors? This is the data that comes from the sensors, and I'll just orient you a little bit. Here's the date, and here's the temperature inside the beehive. Each of these squiggly lines is a separate beehive and the sensor associated with that beehive. These two top squiggly lines are hive hugger hives. These are tar paper. The pink line is outside ambient temperature. And you can see here's, you know, day, night, day, night, day, night, day, night, day, night. You know, it sort of follows the temperature. So even here, you know, it's below 0. There's really not a big blip in what's happening inside a really well-insulated hive. And if you can see the temperatures, here's 50. Here's 75, so we're 60s for sure. And remember, 60s, maybe 65. What temperature do these cluster at? 50, 55. So the research that says in well-insulated hives they don't cluster at all, they don't cluster at all, because they don't have to, they're warm enough. Versus, you know, these are consistently in the clustering ranges. And so again, they're not eating that much honey, they don't have to, they're warm. So the other benefit of foil on the inside, as you can see, as an ER nurse, when patients come in with hypothermia, meaning they're super cold, we put on these emergency foil blankets. And they're super thin. Like, how is that keeping that person warm? But foil actually reflects back the radiant heat leaving that person's body. So you want to capture as much heat of that person's body leaving them as you can. And so same idea with the foil facing, because there will be some heat loss through the hive box, that the foil will reflect it back into the box. Another specific design feature that was intentional is the size boxes. They only come in single deep and double deep. And people are like, wait a minute, where's the triple deep? We overwinter in 3 deep. But the data is really clear that, these are Etienne's phrases, the amount of bees to the volume of the hive box space is critical. Too few bees in too large a volume will result in winter failure. That alone. You might have great mite control, lift them tons of honey, but if you have a small cluster and you're overwintering them in a double or even a triple, they're going to die. I mean, think about, do you want to heat a little tiny bungalow or do you want to heat your 3-story mansion, right? And so this study was done in Egypt, and basically they looked at, you know, different hive sizes and how did the bees do in all these different hive box sizes. And the result of that study was, it was observed that the maximum values, hive temperature, honey, pollen, brood, were achieved by using the smallest beehive size. So this is new data too that I think can help a lot of beekeepers. So come late summer, fall, when you're looking to tuck your bees in for the winter, count frames of bees. Like how big is my colony? A lot of them are summer bees, they're going to die anyway. A lot of them might be drones, they're going to die too. So it's smaller, your winter bees are going to be a percentage of what you bought. And so match the number of bees with how many hive boxes you overwinter in. The smaller you can get away with, the better. So that's really it on the hive components, of the Hive Hugger components. I do want to share some of the data we've gotten on this product specifically. So remember, I started this whole adventure going to the University of Minnesota, like, give me some help. Once the first prototype was developed, I went back to the bee lab, and it was just the bee lab staff, so just 15 or 20 people. But Marla Spivak's sitting next to me, Gary Bruder's across the table. And pretty much I said, well, the research that I learned and this product is pretty much the opposite of what you guys are teaching here, right? They teach tar paper ventilated hives, so that you would think that would be a little bit of an awkward conversation. But Marla said, Peggy, what kind of scientists would we be if we didn't embrace new science and new data? She said, get the data, right? Honestly, they just said, we're so busy fighting Varroa, they just haven't put a ton of energy in overwintering. The results that say tar paper ventilation, that was done in the 1960s. And so she's like, bring on the data. So that first year, the university let me experiment on some of their hives. These are the university hives. The first year, I had 10 Hive Hugger, but I actually ventilated them. This is the first model. So the upper entrance is open. This is just a wind block. Some were at Nature's Nectar. But of the 10 that I ventilated, only 50% survival. Because I learned, again, as I mentioned, the warmer it is, that stacking effect just gets worse and worse. So there's just massive amount of heat being lost from the ventilated, super insulated hive. And Etienne, when he ventilated his super insulated hives, he said the results were disastrous. So don't bother super insulating if you're gonna ventilate. It won't end well. But the 10 Hive Hugger hives that were not ventilated, that were truly condensing hives, 90% survival. So that was year one, a couple of years ago. And based on this little trial study, oh, sorry, I'm gonna back up a little bit. That first year, I didn't really know about broodminder yet, but of those 10 that were truly condensing hives, I gave 2 of them to a beekeeper in Wisconsin who does cutouts. And he had broodminder in all of his hives, so he placed a couple in these hives too. And then you can see this was December, January. In January, he calls me, he said, Peg, you need to look at my broodminder data. Your hives, again, Hive Hugger are the top 2, and these are the rest of his hives. He says you're running 20 to 35 degrees warmer than the rest of my hives, and his were condensing hives, R10, R5. Ventilated, not ventilated, sorry, and insulated, but the R32 versus R10, it's just like the Seeley study. For you to really protect your bees, you just need more. Because he's still running in the temperatures where they're clustering, right? 50s. And he said, when he opened the hives in the spring, he said it was like opening the door to a sauna, this hot air rushed out. And then when he weighed them, the Hive Hugger hives consumed 50% less honey, because he weighs them in the fall and in the spring. And again, right, if they're not having to consume honey for energy to stay warm, they'll eat less. And so, but this isn't new data, right? The data already says this happens, but it's like, it happens with Hive Hugger, so, but it should. So that was compelling data. And you can see, remember on the tar paper, the poorly insulated ventilated, they were hanging more close down here, right? They hugged a little bit more of the outside ambient temperature, but you can see at least insulating and not ventilating is better. But ideally, just add more. So based on that first year of data, the University of Minnesota told me about this SARE grant. And they said, do a big study. 20 hives is good, but we'd love to see more data. And so I applied, they wrote a letter of recommendation for me to get the grant, got it. And the original grant was an 80 hive study. We were comparing, this is a picture of the hive study. So there's bee cozy, reflectix, Hive Hugger, tar paper. But my partner, because I don't have this many colonies, she got COVID, and then there were other issues, and we couldn't complete the study. But I can tell you, of the 20 Hive Hugger hives, we had over 90% survival. So this data is a clip of that you saw earlier, the Hive Hugger hives versus the other ones. So 15 to 50 degrees warmer. Last year also, I had a group of researchers I call the all-comers. It's just 30 random people who I gave a Hive Hugger to, just to field test. How did it work? Did the belt fall off? How was it put on or take off? But of these 30 people, after winter was over, I followed up with them in the spring and I said, how'd your bees do? And of the 30 hives, 28% colony moths. But the average in northern climates is 55. So that's a 50% reduction in hive death on all comers. Remember, like, can I put a dent in the 55%? And remember that other research study, insulated hives reduce mortality by 22%. So it appears that absolutely, by really doing great insulation, we can reduce that in half. My belief is a lot of these that did die weren't from cold exposure. Because I talked to the beekeepers, they're like, yeah, I didn't really test or treat for mites. I think they got robbed in the fall. I don't know if they had enough honey. My belief is this, a lot of this is varroa. I think varroa is the biggest killer in the winter, but I think after varroa, then it's cold exposure. So, a little feedback from the beekeepers. These are the all-comers. This guy said he's been beekeeping for 5 years, never had a more robust spring hive inspection than he did after using Hive Hugger. He opened the colony and it looked like it was August. It was full of honey and brood. And so common reports that, larger number of surviving bees, way ahead in the bee buildup, more honey. So future research, as I mentioned, the SARE grant wasn't completed, so the money and the equipment that was left over from the grant, we're doing a study this coming winter. 5 different apiaries in case one person gets laid out, including University of Minnesota. So this winter we're going to be studying, getting more data, and then 150 all-comers. So way more than 30 last year. So I really feel like this winter we already have a really, really solid foundation, but just really great numbers coming into this winter. So the big takeaways. Yes, it appears, not only a review of the literature, but our own data, that a well-insulated condensing winter setup is a significant factor in ensuring overwintering success. Reduces overall mortality, stronger spring colonies, queen lays earlier, less honey consumption, and bees have access to much needed water. I just added these tips. I've been talking to a lot of beekeepers, obviously, and a lot of questions come up. So obviously the first one is manage mites and diseases best you can, because the greatest success going into winter is a strong and healthy hive. The best insulation product in the planet will not protect your bees against winter loss if they're in trouble that way. It might help because your immune systems are stronger and they're going to have more oomph getting through the winter, but there's no guarantee if they're sick or infested with varroa. The other thing is people say, well, when do I put it on? And remember, at 50 degrees, they're already clustering and shivering. They're already working harder than they have to. So a lot of people are like, oh, I put them on after Thanksgiving. Bill Hashpick says if you're wearing a coat, you should have winterized your bees. So there's no harm in putting it on too soon. Like it doesn't add heat to the hive, it just prevents the heat from leaving. So you could put it on a month ago. And again, no rush to take it off. Leave it on till May, end of May, because remember the spring vulnerability, especially leave it on later than you would think. Do not set hive boxes on cement, concrete, or I've now seen steel, because those materials are great thermal conductors, and they'll pull the heat right out of your wooden box. So if you have concrete blocks, put a few 2x4s, and then your hive box, so you have a buffer between those materials. And then lastly, we do still provide 80 to 100 pounds of honey for a double, 60 to 80 for a single bee. And I can tell you they won't need that much, but honey, like that live tree, honey's a great thermal mass. It holds on to the heat, and so it's a buffer. And so it's much better just to leave a lot of honey instead of empty frames. And again, I assure you they won't need it all, but it's good again for that thermal support. So that's it. These are the references if people want to look at any of the research studies themselves. I do want to share that I am still working as a nurse, and I just turned 59 this year, and I thought I would be retiring from nursing, and now I'm doing a startup at my age, and I don't know what got me here. But I feel like I'm supposed to transition out of saving human lives and focus on saving honeybee lives, which I really do love this. I love research, I love beekeepers, so we'll see what the future holds that way. But I also wanted to share that that little 4-year-old boy with a chemotherapy patient, he had metastatic liver cancer when I met him, and he completely beat the odds. He's still living, and so I just want to close with life is precious. Take good care of yourselves, take good care of your loved ones, take good care of your bees. And with that, I'll close unless you all have any questions, and I'm super open to try to answer them.
So now you're saying with like natural bees, we shouldn't even have to ventilate throughout the summer months, the top of the hive.
No, that's right. That's a good question, but no, it's not like they take make an opening and then close it. And though the thermodynamics, you know, you've got the live tree and there's water moving through, does that move the heat some in the summer? Possibly, right, as the, you know, the water's moving up and down the tree column? It might, so that's actually a great question. They don't, so they are able to maintain, but again, it's really well insulated, and so it probably keeps them a lot cooler in the summer too. But no, there was no research that said, yeah, in the summer they move into one with more ventilation and they move back. No, I mean, they're there year round. But great question. If anybody has any information.
I have a friend that watched your video quite a long time ago, and he's thinking about following yours. He's already followed it. But what he's going to do is he's thinking about leaving everything in all summer. Since he said, have you done anything in the summer?
Yeah.
Because he figures you're reflecting back in anyway.
So I've only done one research study for the use of this in hot weather, and I chose like the extreme. I found a beekeeper in Tennessee where he said it's not only hot, it's humid.
Yeah.
And so he had 8 of these, and initially in the beginning of the summer, you know, a fair amount into it, he said productivity, health, strength, better. But there was a point somewhere in the summer where he said it equaled out. There wasn't clear benefit, and then 2 of these hive huggers died. And I've gotten to know Randy Oliver pretty well, and I asked Randy, what are the thermodynamics? Like, what happened that A, it equalized, and B, we had all the temperature humidity sensors, and there was no budge. In fact, you couldn't even tell a difference between the insulated and the non-insulated. But I think what happens is the bees will do whatever it takes to stay at 95. So they will, and I've read the research on it, they will forego the foragers and say, you don't go forage, you stay in here and cool the hive. So there is a reduction in the working force to work on cooling the hive. And so you can't tell, really, other than if you weigh them and count frames of bees, like how productive were they and how strong is the colony, whether the insulation helped or not. So I'm kind of going on and on into it, but the point is, it showed initial benefit and then not, and I don't know why. And so possibly there's a point where, you know, if you're in a crowded bar and there's a bunch of people and it's just hot, that there's a point that you'll overload the air conditioner because the heat people are putting off is too much. And now, like, there's a tipping point where it can't cool efficiently. What happens in a hive when that happens in a beehive, what do? They beard. So when that happens in a hive, they're like, oh, it's too hot in here. We're too many bees, we can't keep up with the cooling. Half of you get out, and then we can kind of keep the hive cooler. So did it hit a tipping point that the bare minimum bees that needed to stay in the hive that couldn't beard were still in too much heat, and that this high RW sort of trapped the heat in? That's possible. So right now, we are not marketing or selling it for, and Minnesota might be totally different, right? It might be perfectly fine in our more moderate summers. So, and Tennessee, because it's super, super humid, maybe the cooling, you know, the evaporation to cool the hive was a factor. But today, I can't speak to using it year-round, but if you want to let me know who your friend is, and
He's in
really-
Arkansas, so you were talking about Tennessee, and he has a lot of moisture problems too. So-
Yeah, well, if he asked me about that, I tell everybody the truth, right? I'm not gonna pretend it's gonna be a great thing when it wasn't. And so I'm only marketing it because I absolutely know it protects them in the winter. But I can't make any claims about it right now. I just need more data. I need to do more research in different climates, maybe hot but not humid, maybe, so that's a great question, and I don't have the answer. Other than, yeah, it wasn't an obvious benefit, so.
Well, maybe, because like I said, a tree, so you have water moving up and down, so it keeps it cooler.
It's cold.
Maybe yours on there, maybe with enough ventilation then, might take some of that out of there,
That's right.
out of a draft, maybe that's possible.
That's right, yeah. It would be fun to do like Etienne and have a bunch of sensors and have all these different configurations and track, ventilation channels and temperature and humidity given different scenarios. I've just, it's not been my focus, but maybe in the years to come, once I get this like sort of done, then we can focus on marketing. But yeah, we're having a hard time keeping up with sales just for winter use. So right now, there's not a need to sort of market it for summer use or hot weather use, but great discussion. Anybody else?
All right. How do you have the bottom entrance of your hive? Are you reduced down, or is it wide open? How
No,
are you
that's a
doing
good
it?
question, yeah. So because this is your only ventilation, so a lot of people ask this question. We recommend inverting it and using the 4 3/4 inch opening. And so the reason for that is when the bees die, because some will, hopefully less in this configuration, you can get a pretty good pile of dead bees on your bottom board without plugging up your ventilation channel. So this, put on your mouse guard, and then you're all set. But people kind of say, well, do you have to tip your hives? Do you have ice dams? Like, is this condensation, like water's pouring out of the hive? And not to get into thermodynamics too much, but in a condensing hive, because it's super warm, warm air can simply hold more moisture than cold air. And without these big swings, in uninsulated hives, when you get these big swings, when it's warm, the hive holds water, and then it gets cold, it'll dump that water. And then it holds water and dumps water. That's why if you aren't insulating, you absolutely have to ventilate because you're getting condensation like crazy. So I don't know if this makes sense, but think about like when it's warm and sunny out and it's sort of humid day, and then at night you have all this condensation on the grass. Like, why did all this condensation occur? It's because the temperatures dropped, so that warm air can't hold the same humidity as cold air, and so condensation happens. Same in a beehive. So hot, cold, just dumping condensation left and right. So you would think there would be more condensation in the fencing hive, but there's not. So that's why you have to, like, nature's nectar, keep changing your moisture board because there's just so much condensation occurring, but not true in a condenser. So long answer to no, 0 ice dams, 0 mold. We never tip the hives. They in fact just sit on wood pallets out in the field. We never checked our lower entrances all winter. We got so much snow last year, so we didn't need to. There was no issue with them plugging up. And people said, well, what about all that snow? Didn't it block the lower entrance? And there is heat leaving from here, for sure. So because it's so toasty warm in there, the heat that leaves the lower entrance just kept the snow melted, especially in front of the hive, but the entire hive, there was snow melted. There was never like a problem with snow building up. But people who have lived in climates where you get a ton of snow, from what I've heard, what happens, I mean, even if you had an upper entrance and the whole hive was buried, it wouldn't help you out. But the heat melts snow like in front of the hive, and then you've got this little igloo, and so there's a little air space in this little dome, and that snow still breathes, and so the bees that are completely buried had no problem, they didn't suffocate at all, because snow breathes. So that's not a concern either. In fact, some cultures I've heard about intentionally bury their hives for the thermal support and just know that that's not going to be a problem for them. So those are other common questions that people ask. All that based on how to put an interest reducer. So the simple setup is basically you've got your hive, you can keep your wooden inner cover in place.
See, that has an upper entrance in that one, but
Yeah.
normally you wouldn't have it then?
No, what we actually do, so first, you do this, comes in your kit, it's a little piece of Reflectix, just to seal the hole, because we want to keep the bees down there. Then you put your panel on top, and then the kits come with a little roll of Tyvek, and so this wouldn't be on, this goes on last. We recommend taping around the perimeter so that you'll plug this hole, and then you'll also seal up the seams between these surfaces so that it minimizes any heat loss. Because people's woodenware is dented or chipped or warped. We don't want heat loss coming out of the top, right? Top needs to stay super warm.
Does Tyvek have any R value to it?
No, it's considered a vapor barrier, so let moisture out, but it doesn't let it in. But it's really more of a heat loss, like air loss protection, but no R value per se. Yeah.
So then your side panels, do they come higher up then, or they stay about that size?
Yeah, they stay there, so you can see they rest on these little landing boards here, so they rest there, and then this is the configuration, so given that setup, the telescoping cover fits on top, and so there's, no air gap there.
So if you're sealing with the tape, do you do any mid-season check?
I know, people aren't used to that either.
Okay.
They want to make sure that they didn't run out of honey, but you don't need to. No, we didn't check them at all. I mean, you gotta trust that they're okay in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could unpeel it and take a peek and then seal it back up, but
But you
no.
don't, you on all your studies, you just seal them up and say, see you in 6 months?
Yep. I know, he wants to try that. There would be, my understanding from DeSanto is you want it as sealed as possible when you do.
Right, but then you let it air out, so.
Yeah, so,
When you do a paper, you want it sealed off, so you close the complete front entrance. Then once after so long, you can open it up again.
yeah.
And probably just the front entrance would be enough air.
Yeah, I don't see any reason you couldn't, so. Good questions, yeah.
Some people use like a mountain camp inside, on top. Is there any need for that in this situation?
So a lot of people, right, asking questions, you will if you didn't leave enough honey. They're like, I have 3 frames of honey. Well, then you kind of have to, right? Sorry, that's not a great thing going into winter, but if that's all you've got, then you have to. But it's not great because it's absorbing moisture, which, in the old ventilated hives, that's a bonus that you got another way to absorb moisture, but you should, if you leave enough, you shouldn't, and it's preferred that you don't. But if you have to, you have to. But again, maybe with this education, people will be like, no, I'm gonna, start feeding them earlier and make sure that they do have enough. Or if you're short on honey, I always say, is there any chance you can condense them down into a single bee? And then you can put whatever frames you've got into just one hive box, and that you're not leaving a bunch of empty space and empty frames. So that's a possibility too.
So that comes in 2 pieces, so if you only have a single, you want to put one of them on, right?
Yeah, well, so this is one piece,
Oh, that is one piece.
that is one piece, yeah.
Okay.
And then, this is the single one, which comes with the belt too, so, yeah, that's it.
What's the cost?
So the standard density, The wrap plus the crown is 88 and free shipping. The high density is 109 and free shipping. The single, I think, is 77. That's the wrap and the crown.
For our area here, 'cause we're warmer than you are in Minneapolis, so the regular would probably be, standard would
This
probably
evidence
be
fee.
pretty good.
Yeah, it's only 1 point less in our value. The biggest difference is it's not as sturdy as far as if you kick this with your boot. This'll be a little, it's just a little more dense. It's twice as dense. So it's more sturdy against compression and moisture, but it's $20 more. But if you're like, I'm a brand new beekeeper and I wanna invest that $20, our hopes are, if you're not replacing your bees with nukes or packages, and you're saving honey, that it'll pay for itself in a year. I mean, that's the math. And we think we priced it pretty affordable. Again, we aren't in it for the money. I can tell you this isn't a big beaker. We're just above cost for what it takes to manufacture.
Can you buy just the top?
You can buy, the top is like $42.50. You can buy just the top, and I can tell you probably a fourth of our sales, they're just buying the top. So, yeah, yep. All right,
How do you get this stuff?
so hivehugger.com, yeah. And, but we're running short on A-frames. We had no idea. I had no idea so many beekeepers used A-frames, and we just didn't buy enough inventory. And so the phone board cutter said, they can't get us more A-frames till January. So we probably have 15 left, if any of you are 8-frame people, but we have a lot of 10-frame left. But hivehugger.com, you can just put in your order, and like I said, free shipping. Down here, it often gets here the next day. Because cold weather's coming next week, so good I came when I did. All right, well, there's little information sheets that I brought if anybody wants those. It's just a one-page summary of kind of the product if you want to take those, but otherwise everything's on the website. This talk, I know you're recording it, but this talk is also on the website if you want to re-look at it. What's that?
YouTube.
It's on the website, but it's a YouTube video. You just access it on the website under science, I think.
You just look up Hive Hugger, it pops up.
Okay,
I looked at it when we first started talking, I watched it, so
okay.
so when we started talking, I knew what you were talking about, kind of, so.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of new information. It's a different way of looking at winterizing. So that's why I'm spending a lot of time on education. And then I love that there were over 10,000 views. And a lot of people are like, thank you for sharing. Like, they have horrific survival, and they feel like they're empowered with the science now. And it's sort of new science. I mean, you saw the dates. I mean, this is new data now that we've got high-tech sensors and whatnot. We didn't know. But now, science is kind of saying there's a better way to do it. So we just built a system that is based on what the science recommends. But you don't need this. Like I said, the DIY works perfectly great. All right, well, thank you for having me. I know you're gonna have another meeting, but we have a 2.5-hour drive back up north, so we're gonna bugger out of here.
We're almost done too,
Oh, you are?
so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, Peggy actually sent down 2 Hive Huggers down to Iowa Hive Producers, and they were on actually the silent auction we had at the Benton at the end of the day, and I actually purchased one of them.
Oh, you did?
So we're gonna try it. We got one. We're gonna put on the hive, so we're gonna try it. So.
Well, you mentioned a raffle. We're happy to leave these 2 behind if you guys want to put them in your raffle or whatever systems you got
Okay.
for. Yeah, I mean, those might as well. We brought them down here, so.
We'd love to.
Yeah,
We'd love to.
Good, good.
We should have had it on this group. We should have had it on this raffle. Well, we can do it. Instead of that, we can maybe do a Hive Hugger. How's that? Huh?
Might be some more people who want to put
Next
their.
month, we'll do it next month. You didn't put your money in there, did you? We'll do it next month. We'll do it next month.
You don't get it.
So, yeah, well, thank you, Peggy. Like I said, I got one, I bought one of them, so I'm gonna put it on. So we're gonna try it, so.
Yay, well, thank you for that.
Anybody got anything else? Any other questions before Peggy leaves? Okay?
She loves
Any-
doing question answers, so you can email her and she'll
Yeah.
spend all day.
Yeah, you can call or email if something comes up.
Okay, does anybody have anything else you gotta bring up? Madison, what do you think, how many we wanna do door prizes, how many we wanna do?
We only got 4 full.
Huh?
We got 4 usually.
Oh, we'll do all four then.
Yeah.
Okay, do the door prizes first.